Hungry children learn how to lie before they learn long division. The pawn shop bell rang with a tired little jingle as I pushed my bicycle through the narrow doorway, rainwater dripping from the tires onto the cracked tile floor. The place smelled like old metal, cigarette smoke, and forgotten lives. My fingers tightened around the blue handlebars Dad had painted for me 3 summers ago before he got sick. Before hospitals started swallowing every dollar we had. Before Mom stopped eating dinner with me and started saying things like, "I already ate at work, sweetheart." I used to believe her. Kids believe a lot of things until life teaches them not to. The old man behind the counter barely looked up from his tiny TV. "Store's closing in 10, he muttered. I swallowed hard and rolled the bike closer. How much if the bell still works? That finally made him look at me. His tired eyes moved from my soaked sneakers to the pink backpack hanging off one shoulder. Then to the bicycle. "Kid, where's your mom?" "Home." "You here alone?" "I'm 8, not 5. He sighed like adulthood had exhausted him decades ago. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. New York looked blurry through the rain-streaked windows. People hurried past without seeing each other. Nobody ever really looked. Except the man sitting inside the black SUV parked across the street. Vincent Moretti had spent the last hour listening to grown men argue over territory, money, and loyalty inside a private restaurant 2 blocks away. Men feared him because he never raised his voice. Never had to. By 35, he owned pieces of the city most politicians pretended didn't exist. Restaurants, shipping docks, nightclubs. Entire neighborhoods whispered his name like prayer or warning, depending on who was speaking. But right now, none of that held his attention. It was the little girl dragging a bicycle through the rain. Luca, the driver, glanced into the rearview mirror. "Problem, boss." Vincent didn't answer immediately. His dark eyes stayed fixed on the pawn shop window. Small hands, pink backpack, blue bicycle. Something about it sat wrong in his chest. "Wait here," he said quietly. Across the street, I watched the pawn shop owner inspect my bike with slow movements that made my stomach hurt worse by the second. "Brakes are shot. They still work." "Not good enough." He spun the front tire. "Chain's rusty too. I cleaned it last week." "Kid." He leaned forward. "This thing ain't worth much." My throat tightened. "Please." The word slipped out before I could stop it. "My mom's sick." His face softened just a little. "Not enough to matter." $40. $40. For birthdays. Summer rides. Dad teaching me how to balance in the church parking lot while Mom laughed from the sidewalk. I nodded anyway because memories didn't buy food. The old man counted out 2 20s while I unclipped the tiny silver bell from the handlebars and slipped it into my pocket. I couldn't leave that part behind. When I stepped back into the rain, the cold hit me immediately. I pulled my hood tighter and crossed toward the grocery store on the corner. I didn't notice the black SUV slowly rolling behind me. Inside the warm store, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while I counted wrinkled dollar bills with careful fingers. 1 can of tomato soup. Half a loaf of wheat bread. Store-brand fever medicine. I carried everything against my chest while the cashier scanned items without looking up. "That all, sweetheart?" "Yes, ma'am." "Your parents waiting outside?" I shook my head. "My mom's home." The woman finally noticed the soaked sleeves and trembling hands. "Honey, are you alone?" I forced a smile because adults got nervous when kids looked too honest. "No," I whispered softly. "My mom is home pretending she already ate." And for the first time in years, Vincent Moretti felt something inside him go completely still. Some people think powerful men stop feeling things after a while. They are wrong. They just learn how to hide it better. The windshield wipers moved slowly across the black SUV as rain continued falling over Manhattan in silver streaks. Vincent Moretti sat motionless in the back seat, one hand resting against the leather armrest while the grocery store receipt turned soft in Lily Dawson's tiny hands across the street. Tomato soup, bread, generic fever, medicine, $32.18. He had spent more than that on whiskey without noticing. Luca glanced back again carefully. "You want me to drive, boss?" Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. "No." The little girl stepped out into the cold, carrying a thin plastic bag against her chest like something fragile enough to break. Her sneakers were soaked through. One lace dragged loose behind her as she hurried down the sidewalk beneath flickering streetlights. Vincent watched her disappear around the corner. Then he opened the door. The rain hit immediately. Cold, sharp, familiar. Men nearby instantly straightened at the sight of him even though nobody spoke his name aloud. That happened often. Fear moved faster than introductions. Vincent ignored them all and crossed the street toward the pawn shop instead. The old owner looked up from behind the counter and nearly dropped his coffee cup. Stores closed. Vincent's eyes drifted toward the empty space where the blue bicycle had been. Little girl sold a bike 10 minutes ago. The man hesitated. I run a business. Vincent reached into his coat pocket and placed 5 crisp $100 bills onto the counter. You are going to keep the bike untouched. The owner blinked in confusion. What? No resale. No parts. No repairs. Vincent's voice stayed calm. Controlled. Somehow that made it more intimidating. And if the little girl comes back for it one day, he pushed the money slightly forward. You tell her it was waiting. Silence stretched inside the tiny shop. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally, the old man swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, sir. Vincent turned without another word. Outside, Luca was already holding the SUV door open. You want the address? Vincent slid inside. I already have it. Men like Vincent Moretti did not become powerful by asking twice. 10 minutes later, the SUV rolled slowly into Queens beneath broken streetlights and crumbling apartment buildings. The neighborhood looked exhausted. Rusted fire escapes. Flickering neon signs. Windows covered with blankets because curtains cost money people here did not have. Vincent stared through the tinted glass as the vehicle stopped across from Building 214. Third floor. Apartment 3B. One dim light glowed weakly behind cracked blinds. Stay here, Vincent said quietly. Boss, with respect, this area is not. Stay here. Luca stopped talking immediately. Upstairs, I sat cross-legged beside the couch, while Mom slept under 3 blankets that still did not stop her shivering. The room smelled faintly like cough medicine and radiator heat that barely worked. I stirred the tomato soup slowly because if you stirred things long enough, sometimes it felt like there was more of it. Mom's breathing sounded rough again. That scared me more than the fever. The doctor at urgent care said she needed rest, antibiotics, and less stress. Funny thing about poor people. Nobody ever tells you where to buy less stress. I heard footsteps outside the apartment around the same moment the hallway light buzzed overhead. Slow footsteps. Heavy. Not drunk heavy. Careful heavy. Mom stirred weakly on the couch. Lily, I am here. Another knock came at the door. Calm. Controlled. Not loud enough to scare neighbors. My stomach dropped anyway. Rent collectors knocked loud. Bad people knocked soft. I stood slowly, staring at the peeling paint on the door while rain rattled against the windows behind me. Then a man's voice came through the wood. Deep. Quiet. Dangerous in a way I could not explain. You bought the wrong medicine. Fear has a sound. Sometimes it is loud. Sometimes it is nothing more than silence on the other side of a door while your hand trembles against a broken lock. I stared at the peeling white paint in front of me while rain hissed softly against the apartment windows. Mom shifted weakly on the couch behind me, another rough cough catching in her chest. The stranger outside waited patiently. No pounding. No threats. Somehow that felt worse. Lily. Mom's voice sounded thin and exhausted. Who is it? I swallowed hard. I do not know. For a second nobody moved. Then the man outside spoke again. The fever medicine you bought contains aspirin. Calm. Deep. Controlled. If your mother has pneumonia, it can make the bleeding worse. My stomach tightened instantly. I looked down at the plastic bag sitting beside the soup pot. Store brand. Cheapest option on the shelf. I had not known medicine could be wrong. I had only known it had to fit inside $32. Mom tried to sit up too quickly and winced. Lily, do not open that door. I nodded even though she could not see me. Outside, the stranger exhaled softly like he understood exactly why she was afraid. There is a pharmacy 2 blocks away still open. Silence again. I already sent someone. My fingers tightened around the chain lock. Every warning Mom had ever taught me screamed inside my head. Do not trust strangers. Do not open doors at night. Do not let dangerous people know you are alone. But dangerous people usually sounded cruel. This man sounded careful. Behind me, another coughing fit bent Mom nearly double beneath the blankets. I made my decision before fear could stop me. The chain slid loose with a metallic click. I opened the door 3 inches. Then my breath caught. He was taller than the hallway, suddenly felt capable of holding. Dark wool coat damp from rain. Black gloves. Broad shoulders that blocked the flickering hallway light behind him. His face looked sharp enough to belong on a magazine cover, if not for the coldness in his eyes. Not empty cold. Controlled cold. Like winter trapped inside a person. Two men stood farther down the hallway near the stairs wearing dark jackets and serious expressions, but they stayed back respectfully. The man in front looked down at me carefully. Not impatient. Not fake sweet either. Just observing. You should not open doors that quickly, he said quietly. I almost shut it again out of embarrassment. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed up the stairs. Another man appeared carrying a white pharmacy bag. He handed it immediately to the stranger beside my door without speaking. The stranger crouched slightly, so he did not seem so impossibly tall. Antibiotics. Fever reducer. Electrolyte packets. He held out the bag toward me. Directions are written on the boxes. I stared without moving. Why? It slipped out before I could stop it. Adults always wanted something eventually. The stranger's expression shifted almost invisibly at the question. Like maybe he had forgotten children learned that lesson young in neighborhoods like this. Because your mother is sick, he answered simply. And because children should not have to sell bicycles for medicine. Heat rushed into my face immediately. Shame. Surprise. Panic. How do you know about that? His eyes held mine steadily. I was there. The hallway suddenly felt smaller. My chest tightened. Are you following me? One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Tonight? Yes. Behind me, Mom forced herself upright on the couch the moment she heard that. Fear sharpened her voice instantly. Lily, close the door. The stranger slowly stood back to his full height again. Claire Dawson, he said calmly toward the apartment without raising his voice. If I intended harm, we would not still be having this conversation through a doorway. Silence followed that. Heavy silence. Then Mom appeared behind me wrapped in blankets. Pale from fever, but still trying to stand between me and danger. The moment her eyes met his, something changed in the hallway. Not recognition. Something stranger. Like two exhausted people seeing opposite sides of the same storm. People who survive too long, without help develop a dangerous habit. They start treating kindness like a trap. Mom held the blanket tighter around her shoulders while staring at the man in our doorway like he might disappear if she blinked wrong. Her blonde hair stuck slightly to her forehead from fever, and shadows darkened the skin beneath her eyes. She looked exhausted in the way only poor people understood. Not tired. Worn down. The stranger noticed it too. I could tell by the way his expression hardened almost invisibly as his eyes moved across the apartment behind us. Peeling wallpaper. Broken radiator. Sink full of dishes because the hot water shut off yesterday. People with money usually looked away from things like that. He did not. Who are you? Mom asked quietly. Her voice stayed calm, but I felt the tension in her hand when she moved slightly in front of me. Protective, even sick. The man answered without hesitation. Vincent Moretti. The hallway went silent after that name. One of the men near the stairs shifted slightly, watching Mom carefully now, waiting for recognition. It came. I saw it immediately in the way her face lost color beneath the fever. Not because she knew him personally. Everybody in New York knew the name Vincent Moretti. Maybe not officially. Maybe not out loud. But people whispered it. Restaurants. Shipping companies. Real estate. Men in expensive suits who appeared when somebody crossed the wrong line. Mom. I whispered. She ignored me. Her eyes never left his. Why are you here? Vincent glanced toward me briefly before answering. Your daughter should not have been alone tonight. Mom's jaw tightened instantly. We are handling things. The words came too quickly, too defensive, like she had repeated them to creditors and landlords and social workers for months. Vincent studied her for a long moment. You sold your wedding ring 3 weeks ago, he said calmly. Your electricity is 2 months overdue. Your landlord filed eviction paperwork yesterday morning. And your daughter sold her bicycle for soup. Mom froze completely. So did I? The hallway suddenly felt ice cold. How do you know all that? She whispered. Vincent's expression never changed. I asked questions. About us. Yes. Fear moved across Mom's face first. Then anger. Real anger. The kind people carried when life took too much for too long. You do not get to investigate my family because you feel sorry for us. Vincent went still at that word. Sorry. Something dark flickered behind his eyes for half a second before disappearing again. Pity is not why I am here. Mom laughed once softly, but there was no humor in it. Men like you do not knock on broken apartment doors to help strangers. Behind Vincent, rainwater dripped steadily from the stairwell ceiling. One of the hallway lights buzzed weakly overhead. Somewhere downstairs, a baby cried through thin apartment walls. New York never really slept. It just suffered quieter after midnight. Vincent finally looked directly at Mom again. Greg Turner. The moment he said the name, all the anger disappeared from her face, replaced instantly by fear. Real fear. Her fingers tightened against the blanket around her shoulders. What about him? He owns this building now. Mom did not answer. She did not have to. Vincent already knew. He stepped slightly closer to the doorway, though not enough to frighten me. 3 years ago, your husband died in a construction accident. His voice stayed calm. 6 months later, Turner offered legal assistance with the insurance settlement. Mom's breathing became uneven. Stop. Vincent ignored it gently. Then your house transferred ownership through a forged refinancing agreement connected to one of Turner's holding companies. My stomach twisted because I had never heard Mom sound scared like this before. I said stop. Vincent's eyes darkened slightly. Claire. Her name sounded strange coming from him. Softer somehow. He did not just bankrupt you. Silence swallowed the hallway completely. Then Vincent said the next words so quietly I almost missed them. He has been doing this to families for years. There are moments when exhausted people stop fighting because they realize the stranger in front of them somehow knows their pain better than their friends ever did. Mom stared at Vincent like she wanted to slam the door and ask him to stay all at once. Fever had turned her cheeks pale beneath the dim apartment light, but I could still see the pride holding her upright. Pride was strange like that. It survived things money did not. How much do you want? She asked quietly. Vincent blinked once. Excuse me. Nothing is free. Her voice cracked slightly from exhaustion. Not in this city. Rainwater slid from the edge of his dark coat onto the hallway floor while silence stretched between them. Behind him, the two men near the stairs pretended not to listen even though they clearly heard every word. Vincent finally answered carefully. I did not come here to collect something from you. Mom laughed softly again. Bitter this time. That is exactly what dangerous men always say first. Something unreadable crossed Vincent's face at that. Not anger. Almost regret. His eyes drifted slowly across the apartment behind us again. The couch where Mom slept because the bedroom ceiling leaked too badly now. The stack of overdue notices beside the microwave. The children's drawings taped carefully to cracked walls because making a place feel warm cost less than fixing it. Then his attention landed on the framed photograph sitting crooked near the sink. Me between Mom and Dad at Coney Island 3 years ago, before everything collapsed. Vincent went very still. Michael Dawson, he said quietly. Mom's expression changed immediately. You knew him? No, Vincent kept staring at the photo. But I know the company he worked for. Mom wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. Then you know they buried the investigation before his funeral flowers even died. I looked between them in confusion. Mom almost never talked about Dad's accident. Adults thought kids did not notice things, but grief had a sound. It lived in apartments long after funerals ended. Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. Turner Construction paid the city inspector before the scaffolding report disappeared. Mom froze. What? Vincent looked at her directly now. The support bolts failed because cheap materials replaced the approved steel order 2 weeks before the collapse. My chest tightened hearing Dad reduced to words like collapse and report and approved steel. Mom's breathing became uneven again. No, I checked before I came upstairs. His voice stayed low. Controlled. 3 workers died that morning. Your husband was blamed because he filed the final safety signature. Mom gripped the edge of the doorway hard enough her knuckles turned white. Michael said somebody was changing numbers in the reports. Her voice sounded distant now. Shaking. The week before he died, he told me he was going to expose something. Vincent nodded once slowly. He was right. Silence swallowed the apartment completely. Even the hallway seemed quieter somehow. I looked up at Mom and realized tears were sliding down her face without her noticing. Not loud crying. Just silent heartbreak from a wound reopening years later. Vincent noticed too. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, softer around the edges. Greg Turner built his fortune stealing from desperate people, he said quietly. Insurance scams. Illegal foreclosures. Construction fraud. Mom looked up sharply. Then why is he still free? For the first time since arriving, something dangerous flickered visibly in Vincent's eyes. Not rage exactly. Something colder. Older. Because men like him learned to hide behind men like me. The hallway fell completely silent after that confession. Even his own people looked surprised he said it aloud. Vincent seemed to realize it too because his expression closed immediately afterward. Controlled again. Untouchable again. But the damage was already done. Mom had heard honesty in his voice. Real honesty. The kind rich, powerful men almost never gave away for free. Vincent reached slowly into his coat pocket and removed a small white business card. No logo. No title. Just a phone number embossed in black lettering. He placed it gently on the hallway table beside the door. If your daughter gets sick, he said quietly, or if Turner's people come near this apartment again. His dark eyes lifted toward Mom one last time. Call me before you call anyone else. The strange thing about hope is that it can feel terrifying after you spend enough time without it. Vincent Moretti left our apartment just after 1 in the morning. The hallway swallowed him first. Then the sound of polished shoes on old stairs disappeared too. But somehow his presence stayed behind anyway. In the silence. In the business card sitting beside the microwave. In the way Mom stared at the closed door long after he was gone. I carried the pharmacy bag carefully to the kitchen counter while rain continued tapping softly against the windows. Mom. She blinked like she had forgotten I was still standing there. What? Should I make the soup now? Her eyes softened instantly. Whatever fear had been living in them moments ago shifted aside long enough for something warmer to appear. Yeah, baby. Her voice sounded tired again. Human again. Soup sounds good. I heated the can slowly while Mom sat curled beneath blankets on the couch watching steam rise from the radiator that barely worked. Every few seconds her eyes drifted toward the white business card again. Finally she spoke quietly. You are not allowed to tell anyone he was here tonight. I frowned. Why? Mom looked down at her hands. Because men like Vincent Moretti change things when they walk into your life. The soup smelled like tomatoes and salt, and something close to comfort. I handed her the bowl carefully along with the new medicine. She studied the labels for a long moment before laughing softly under her breath. This stuff costs almost $80. $80 sounded impossible to me. Maybe he is nice, I whispered. Mom looked at me immediately. Nice men do not have people scared to say their names out loud. But he helped us. Her expression cracked slightly at that. Like she wanted to disagree, but could not find a reason. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed suddenly on the coffee table. Both of us jumped. Unknown number. Mom hesitated before answering carefully. Hello. Silence. Then I watched confusion slowly replace exhaustion on her face. What do you mean paid? She sat upright too quickly. No, there has to be some mistake. Another pause. Tomorrow. Her voice dropped softer now. You are serious? She ended the call slowly while staring at nothing. Mom. She looked at me with disbelief still frozen across her features. That was the electric company. Are we getting shut off? No, her voice sounded almost distant. Somebody paid the balance in full. My eyes widened instantly. Vincent. Mom closed her eyes briefly like she had already known. The apartment suddenly felt different after that. Not fixed. Not magically healed. But lighter somehow. Like the walls could breathe again. The heater clicked louder a few seconds later, and warm air finally drifted through the vents for the first time in weeks. I smiled automatically. Mom did not. She stared toward the rain-streaked windows with growing unease. Somewhere across the city, inside a penthouse office 30 stories above Manhattan, Vincent stood alone beside floor-to-ceiling glass while the skyline glowed gold beneath storm clouds. Luca waited silently near the doorway holding a tablet full of financial reports. Turner moved another $4 million offshore this morning, he said carefully. Vincent said nothing. His attention stayed fixed on the city below. Boss. Vincent finally spoke without turning around. How many eviction notices this month? Luca hesitated slightly. Connected to Turner Properties? Yes. 37 families. Vincent's jaw tightened once. 37. He thought about Claire Dawson heating canned soup in a freezing apartment while a little girl sold her bicycle to keep the lights on. Then he thought about Greg Turner drinking expensive whiskey somewhere downtown pretending stolen lives were just business. Vincent reached for the crystal glass beside him but stopped halfway. Suddenly the whiskey tasted disgusting in his imagination. Freeze Turner Holdings before the market opens. Luca looked up immediately. All of it. Vincent's reflection stared back at him coldly through the glass skyline. I want him awake when everything starts collapsing. Power does not always destroy people immediately. Sometimes it waits until they finally feel safe enough to breathe again. The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through our apartment windows in pale gray streaks, while the radiator hummed steadily for the first time all winter. I woke up confused by the warmth. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I smelled coffee. Real coffee. Not the watered-down instant packets Mom stretched for weeks. I walked slowly into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and froze. Mom stood at the stove wearing one of Dad's old sweatshirts with damp hair falling over her shoulders. She still looked tired, but color had finally returned to her face. The sight hit me, so suddenly my chest hurt a little. She smiled softly when she noticed me standing there. "Good morning, baby." I stared at the coffee mug in her hand. "You are standing." Her laugh came easier today. Apparently antibiotics are magic. I wrapped my arms around her waist before I could stop myself. Mom held me tightly for a second longer than usual, like maybe she had been scared too. Then her expression shifted when someone knocked on the apartment door again. 3 sharp knocks this time. Official sounding. Fear instantly returned to the room like it had only been waiting outside. Mom's body went tense beneath my arms. "Stay behind me," she whispered automatically. She crossed the apartment carefully and opened the door only halfway. A man in a navy suit stood in the hallway holding a thick envelope. Not one of Vincent's men. This one looked corporate. Expensive watch. Expensive haircut. Nervous eyes. "Claire Dawson." Mom nodded cautiously. "I am Harold Finch from Turner Holdings Legal Division." The moment she heard the company name, her shoulders stiffened. "What do you want?" The man swallowed visibly before handing over the envelope. "I have been instructed to deliver this personally." Mom accepted it slowly without opening it. "If this is another eviction notice..." "Actually," he interrupted awkwardly, "your eviction filing has been withdrawn effective immediately." Silence. Even the hallway seemed confused. Mom blinked once. "What?" The lawyer adjusted his tie nervously. "Additionally, your mortgage transfer case from 3 years ago is being reopened pending internal review." My eyes widened. Mom just stared at him like her brain refused to process the words. "Why?" The man hesitated too long. "I am not authorized to discuss ongoing matters." Behind him, 2 more residents had opened their apartment doors slightly to listen. News traveled fast in buildings like ours. Mom's voice dropped colder. "Tell Greg Turner I am not signing anything." "Miss Dawson." The lawyer lowered his voice carefully. "Mr. Turner is currently unavailable." Something in the way he said unavailable made even me notice. Mom noticed too. Unavailable where? Another hesitation. "Federal investigators arrived at several Turner properties this morning." My stomach flipped instantly. Mom slowly looked down at the envelope in her hands like it might explode. The lawyer cleared his throat awkwardly. "There is also a reimbursement check included for previous utility overcharges connected to the property management company." Then he almost whispered the next part. "For what it is worth, Miss Dawson, people like Turner usually never answer for anything." His eyes flicked toward the stairwell briefly. "Fear. Respect. Maybe both. Somebody very important must care what happens to your family." The hallway went silent after he left. Mom closed the door slowly while still holding the envelope against her chest. Her hands trembled slightly. "Mom." She looked down at me with disbelief written all over her face. "I think," her voice cracked softly, "I think Vincent Moretti just declared war on somebody for us." Across Manhattan, Greg Turner screamed at 3 attorneys simultaneously inside his luxury office, while stock reports flashed red across every screen in the room. Frozen accounts. Federal subpoenas. Missing investors. One banker refused his calls entirely. Another resigned that morning. Greg slammed both hands against his desk, breathing hard. Who was doing this? Nobody answered. Because everybody already knew. The most dangerous thing a powerful man can lose is not money. It is control. By Friday morning, Greg Turner's empire looked like a building somebody had quietly removed support beams from overnight. News anchors smiled politely while discussing investigations into fraudulent construction contracts. Investors vanished. Bank accounts froze. One city council member publicly denied ever meeting him despite photographs proving otherwise. And somewhere beneath all that panic sat one terrified truth Greg could finally feel breathing down his neck. Somebody stronger had decided he was finished. Mom tried pretending none of it had anything to do with us. That lasted exactly 2 days. "Do not answer unknown numbers," She reminded me for the fourth time while buttoning her waitress uniform before work. The fever was gone now, but exhaustion still lived behind her eyes. And locked the door immediately after school. I sat at the kitchen table coloring quietly. You think he is dangerous? Mom froze slightly at the question. She knew exactly which he I meant. Vincent Moretti had become something strange inside our apartment. Never spoken loudly. Always present anyway. The repaired heater. The groceries that mysteriously appeared outside our door yesterday morning. The landlord suddenly apologizing in the hallway like he had discovered religion overnight. Mom grabbed her coat slowly. I think men like Vincent survive by becoming dangerous first. But he helped us. Her expression softened painfully at that, because children always forced simple truths into complicated situations. Sometimes good things and frightening things come from the same people, Lily. Before I could answer, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Mom stared at the screen for a second before declining the call immediately. Then it rang again. Her shoulders stiffened. Third time. Fourth. Finally, she answered with visible frustration. What? Silence. Then all the color drained from her face. How did you get this number? My stomach tightened instantly. Mom turned away toward the sink, lowering her voice. I told your lawyers already. I am not signing anything. Another silence. Longer this time. Then Mom whispered something I had never heard in her voice before. Fear. Real fear. Stay away from my daughter. The call disconnected. She stood frozen for a moment, still clutching the phone against her ear. Mom. She blinked hard before forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. It is nothing. But adults only said it is nothing when something terrible already started. That afternoon the sky turned heavy gray again, while cold wind pushed garbage down Queens sidewalks in little spinning circles. School let out early because of the storm warning. I walked home with my hood pulled tight and crayons rattling inside my backpack. Halfway down 42nd Street, I noticed the black sedan moving slowly beside the curb. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then the window lowered halfway. Greg Turner looked very different from television interviews. Older, sweating slightly despite the cold weather. Expensive coat. Nervous eyes. Lily Dawson? Every instinct Mom ever taught me screamed instantly. Run. But he smiled quickly like adults do when they know children are afraid. I knew your father. My feet stopped before my brain could help it. Dad. Greg opened the passenger door slightly. I just want to talk about your mother. The storm wind howled between buildings while my heartbeat suddenly felt too loud inside my ears. Mom said not to talk to strangers. Greg's smile twitched strangely at that. I am not a stranger, sweetheart. I am trying to help. Your family before bad people make things worse. Somewhere down the block a black SUV turned sharply onto the street. Fast enough to spray rainwater across parked cars. Greg noticed it immediately. And for the first time since speaking to me, real fear appeared on his face. Get in the car, he said quietly. Now. Sometimes children recognize monsters faster than adults because they still trust the feeling in their stomach when something feels wrong. Rain whipped sideways across the street while Greg Turner held the passenger door open with shaking fingers. Up close he smelled like expensive cologne, trying unsuccessfully to cover panic sweat. Get in, he repeated quietly. You are not safe here. My heartbeat hammered so hard it hurt. Then the black SUV stopped across the intersection. Hard enough to splash rainwater across the sidewalk. The driver door opened first. Lucas stepped out fast, eyes scanning the street instantly. But Greg was not looking at him. He was staring at the back passenger door like a man watching something inevitable arrive. Vincent Moretti stepped into the storm without rushing. Dark coat, black gloves, rain sliding from his shoulders while traffic noise faded strangely around him. People on the sidewalk moved aside automatically without understanding why. Power did that sometimes. It entered a space before words did. Vincent's eyes found me immediately, then shifted slowly toward Greg. The temperature of the entire street seemed to drop. Step away from the child, Vincent said calmly. Greg forced a laugh that sounded broken around the edges. You do not own this city, Moretti. Vincent stopped a few feet away. Rain tapped softly against the black SUV behind him. No, his voice stayed quiet. But you made the mistake of thinking nobody would notice what you did to her family. Greg's face tightened instantly. You think this is about charity? Vincent said nothing. Somehow silence felt worse. Greg looked toward me again desperately. Your father knew the truth. My stomach twisted hearing Dad mentioned in his voice. The accident was never supposed to happen. Vincent's expression changed almost invisibly after that. Colder now. Dangerous in a deeper way. Greg kept talking too fast, panic spilling through every word. Michael threatened to expose everybody involved. Investors, inspectors, union contacts. He pointed shakily toward Vincent. Men connected to him too. I looked at Vincent instantly. The storm howled between buildings while his jaw tightened once. That was before my time, he said quietly. Greg laughed again. Hollow. There is always a before your time with men like you. Another car turned onto the block suddenly. Then another. Federal vehicles. Dark sedans with flashing lights reflecting across wet pavement. Greg noticed them too late. Real terror crossed his face for the first time. No. Agents stepped out quickly while pedestrians stopped to stare from beneath umbrellas. Nobody shouted. Nobody ran. The city just watched another powerful man begin collapsing in public. Greg backed away slowly toward his car. You set me up. Vincent's expression never changed. No, rainwater dripped from his dark hair onto the sidewalk. You spent years setting yourself up. The agents approached carefully while Greg's breathing turned uneven. One reached for his arm. Greg looked toward Vincent one last time. You think helping one little girl changes what you are? The entire street went silent after that question. Vincent stood perfectly still beneath the storm while headlights reflected across his face in cold silver streaks. Then his eyes shifted toward me. Small backpack. Wet sneakers. Fear I was trying hard not to show. Something softened in his expression for half a second. Barely there. Human. No, he answered quietly. But she did. 3 weeks later, Mom and I stood outside a small brick townhouse in Queens holding new keys while movers carried boxes inside. The legal case against Turner Holdings expanded every day. Families started getting compensation checks. Construction investigations reopened. People who spent years ignored were finally being heard. Mom still did not fully trust any of it. Sometimes healing arrived too late for trust to catch up immediately. I understood that now. A familiar black SUV sat parked quietly across the street while autumn leaves drifted. Along the sidewalk, Vincent leaned against the passenger door, watching workers carry furniture inside. Not smiling, just observing like always. I ran toward him before Mom could stop me. Wait. Vincent looked down as I held something out carefully in both hands. The tiny silver bicycle bell. The one I kept from the pawn shop. His eyes rested on it silently. The owner said somebody paid to keep my bike safe. I whispered. Vincent said nothing. He did not have to. I smiled slowly. Thank you. For a second, the powerful man everybody feared looked strangely uncertain what to do with simple gratitude. Then he crouched slightly, so we were eye level. Your mother was right about one thing, Lily. What? Rain clouds drifted slowly above the city skyline behind him. The world has dangerous men in it. His voice stayed soft, controlled. But sometimes, his eyes lifted briefly toward Mom, standing safely on the porch behind me. They finally choose the right side.